Hi, Ed.
Well, good morning to you.
Hi. So it's been about a month and a half since we last had a dialogue that we're recording to offer for others to participate in.
Mhm.
Um, so life happens, and I wish we could do it more often, but here we are again. So we'll
No,
continue. Yeah,
good to see you again.
yeah. So I do periodically go back into reconnecting with what we have previously talked about. And clearly, and by those who are listening, they will be aware of how rich your life has been in the diversity of it and the depth of it, and your free fall in it, impulse in your being established in the heart, and also your very thorough investigation and study and participation. And we've broadly gone through all of that. And one of the questions I wanted to ask you is, are there more things that, or experiences, or memories, or events that you may want to speak about that were sparked by virtue of our beginning this dialogue and my asking you about your life? That's one question. The other one is, how does all of what we've talked about so far brings you into the present time, and more succinctly, your specific relationship to your choice to incarnate Beezone? Because so many people have been incredibly grateful for the work that you've done, the service that you have done. And specifically, I can speak about that in my gratitude for how much I've learned from you and from Beezone, from your process of involvement with it, and how many people I know that you combine with in order to do the service and the work that you do. It's remarkable. And I know that over time, more and more people will be drawn into the appreciation of what you do. So I felt that for those who do participate in what you give and offer and have put together, then it might be interesting for them to hear about how that came into being.
Well, thank you for your questions, and I really do enjoy our conversations together because you have a great capacity to want to listen and to incorporate and to be in relationship to. So you definitely are a rare person to speak with. So I appreciate um, your whole way in which you are, how you respond and how you speak and how you connect with me and other people. So
Thank
that's I'd
you.
like to say first. So, and I get a sense that you're authentic and honest. I mean, a lot of people ask questions, and I have had other people ask me these kinds of questions, like how did you start Beezone? But it's like a news reporter or somebody who's your neighbor across the hedge. They don't have the depth, and you definitely have the depth. So I really feel honored to be responding to your
Mhm.
question. So
Mhm.
the B zone. Well, the B zone really came out of my understanding or trying to understand, even before the World Wide Web existed, the depth and the breadth of Adida's teaching. And so,
Okay.
I come from a Buddhist background. I come from a kind of I'm not a scholar, but I'm a researcher and I want to understand the literature and the background and the history. And I do know there's a depth and it's not just for me reading a book or studying a paragraph and doing something with that, because it's the words and ideas are always pointing to something. them, and the words in themselves are interesting in many ways. But I'm also involved with a lot of other history and psychology and education and things like that. So as an educator, a teacher, a student, I want to
Yeah.
understand. So when I first came to the community, now remember, my only connection to the community was through the literature,
Right.
and that was only through the magazines.
Mhm.
But then when I came into his company, it was his direct transmission that then brought me back fully into the community, which I was not a part of. So anyway, when I first came to the community, any scrap of paper with a bit of teaching on it, or a word or audio tape or something, I just really took to heart and really grabbed everything I could. And what I found is that there was so many things outside the printed, published literature. There were
Yeah.
bootleg tapes, there were, dialogues that were not published, and people themselves, some people
Mm.
had
Mm.
collected a lot of, um, you know, um, unpublished materials, transcripts. And
Yes.
so, the first thing I grabbed is any opportunity to be in the literature, the literary world of that. So there was a kind of a steady group in the evening. You had a service to function to do, and I
Mhm.
got involved with editing the talks.
Mm.
So I
Mhm.
started to see that there was a lot being done to the published word,
Yeah.
and I was, in many ways, I find not only the published word to be of great interest, but what is not published to be in some ways greater, because that always reflected something about what they didn't want to put out there, or the way it was said, or whatever. And so I
Yeah.
learned a lot that a lot of what I
Mm.
was reading in the books was really not his full word. It was edited. It was kind of sculptured. So all of that really I'm always interested in not only what's in front of me, but I want to see behind the corners and under the table and whatever. So I really just got into all of that stuff. And I am asked through my friends and other people that I connected to, and other people had similar interests that I did, so much material. And I
Mm.
am a scribe. I really do feel that I'm a scribe. I like to go into the old manuscripts, and I like to go into it in a very detailed kind of way and look at every comma and every paragraph and every word and what
Mm.
that word relates to that word and all of that
Mm.
stuff. So I really just got into that. And of
That's
course, the
great.
World Wide Web came out in the 90s, but I'm talking about 82 when I came, 83, and all through the 90s.
Mm.
So, I was just into that. So I really wanted to give a gift. So I got involved with the World Wide Web very early, as we've spoken about before. And then at one point in time, I published a little pamphlet, and I laid it at his feet around 2000 in Lake County, and gave it to him as a gift. And it had, what I had put together so far in a short booklet of the Beezone. And only later did I find out it never really was given to him, but it was my offering, and I just kept with that. Um, and then things started to develop, and I kept on doing it on the World Wide Web and publishing his materials. And it was only through my study and my interest and the other materials that weren't published. And
Right.
that's where I
Mm.
ran into some of the, let's say, creative endeavors I've had to work with the editorial people and the people who hold the copyright and things of that sort, which I still have a healthy and uh, I have legal agreements with Dottie Dom, and
Yes. Yes.
I'm above the board, shall we say.
That is wonderful. Um, the fact that you had the wherewithal to collect this material so early on is an incredible treasure. And I understand that there, are you going to pull something out there?
Can I show you
Yes,
something?
yes, yes.
Keep talking. I'll be there in a second here.
Yeah. So when I know that many people, including the editors and writers and devotees in the formally institutional responsibility aspects, that they also treasure what you have to offer. And actually, from what I understand, they oftentimes will ask or come to you as a resource.
Yeah, I've become an unofficial archivist, in many ways because I have so much material.
Yeah.
Now
Yeah.
I have to I'm not going to show too much of this, but
well, this is prasad. This is prasad. This is wonderful. These are wonderful little gems. Or big gems, with great impact and import.
So, during my years of working with people, a couple of them had worked in editorial. Now, I guess I could mention one person in particular who was a chief editor. His name was Georg Forstein. Georg and I were very close friends. He worked with my wife in the yoga foundations in the beginning and came over my house regularly for years. And when he left the United States and went to Saskatchewan up in Canada, he gave me all he's one of many. And this is why I'm kind of like an unofficial archivist. He gave me all of his materials on Adida.
Wow, that's beautiful. Okay.
So when I say all of his materials, these are not just published materials. And I don't mind showing this because it's my possession.
Sure.
So some of the materials that I have, you just don't see anymore. You don't see anywhere.
Ah, beautiful. Wow.
So these are individual letters in handwriting form. They're not just letters. They're his work.
Yes, well, that's Beloved's handwriting. I recognize it immediately. Yes. Now, this is a copy of a letter, correct?
Yeah, this is a copy of his Yellow Pages.
Yes. Yes. Oh, boy.
So out of these materials, I have gone through them with a microscope. Like I said, I'm a scribe, right?
Yes.
So I've gone, not all of these, I have tons of these kinds of materials. And out of these, I have gleaned, his teaching is so complex, subtle, and it really can't be put into a published book to say it's a complete doctrinal and really saying his teaching, because there's so much subtle. So I've kind of put little books together. So this is what I do. I'm really like I said, a scribe. I really go into what his word is and the context of the word and the nuance of it. And there's so much of a nuance to his teaching. And it's a profound study. So it takes me out of the fundamentalist position and brings me into a more of a wider kind of you have to be immersed in the teaching you can't just think it. You have to be like consumed, where your speech, his speech, the word, your understanding, his understanding. I don't know. Sometimes you can't tell the difference. You also really know that's not me. It's not, I don't know this stuff, but it comes through when I speak, and I go, oh, okay. So anyway, it comes alive. You incorporate, and and are also guided the moment to moment, because this is really the key is all of this. And then you have to embody it. You have to practice it. You have to do the practices. You have to, do it. So anyway, so through my study, it brought me into my service.
Yeah.
And that's what I've never stopped doing it. I do it today, and I'm getting on there in the years, and I've done it all my life, and I continue to do it. And so it's developed into what the Beezone is today. But also it crosses into a lot of other things that I do in other areas of my life, because I do other things.
So it's all integrated then. It's because when you speak about how it came into being, and as you describe the reasons for why you chose to do this, and you're describing yourself as a scribe and describing your impulse to want to know the whole feeling picture of it, not just as it appears. It reminds me of the ways that you described aspects of your character even as a child. The patterns of the manner in which your heart moved you to discover the truth of it, of any situation that you were in. And so when you describe this impulse in relationship to Adida's word and his teaching, you're describing as you collected this material, investigated it further, you were looking at it inside, outside, upside, downside, every which way, really immersing yourself in it. And I hear him communicate, as you say that to me, I hear him say, my body is the teaching. The teaching is me as I am. It is the eternal process of divine self-revelation. And you're describing the participatory asana that's necessary for radical understanding to take hold, and to actually be able to be, to really fully receive the gift. So you're immersing yourself in it entirely. And this is what I think people are more and more aware of in terms of all of what you have there at your fingertips. That is incredible blessings of his work, of his Leela. So it's not only that you're describing an abstract verbal message, that's just a dharmic philosophy or something an intellectual can study, but your immersion in it has to do with the nitty-gritty of the real process that occurred, that is his Leela. Because just for a moment, in terms of your description of the published word that comes out and that came out, I of course participated with him in his process of observing and actually proofreading, receiving the yellow pages, watching him write the yellow pages. As I described, he always had a clipboard with him, literally, always. I was responsible, and as others were, to make sure that the clipboard was right there. So hand it to me. Like, the spontaneity of how this poured out of him. And as you know, I mean, millions of pages over time, have fallen out of his person to make this communication and to instruct. And even the letter that you hold of, dear Fred, I think, okay, who's Fred? Who's Fred? Like it's all part of the Leela. And that's in 1971. and then I think back at that time, and he was actually writing personal letters on his yellow pages. I'm thinking,
Well,
okay.
I have all his correspondence with the publishers at CSA Press, talking to the editors and the publishers, his
Yes,
checks, his personal Franklin Jones letters
yes,
to these people,
yes.
and how he's talking to people. And so here's what it brings to me is that the person that you're speaking, you're not speaking about an abstract,
No,
disembodied guru. You speak to
no.
a person,
Mm,
an embodied, fully embodied
fully.
individual, and you're seeing how he is communicating, how precise, how exact, how nuanced, how he is so impeccable in all
Mm,
his dealings, everything that he does. It's an inspiration,
mm,
also a revelation, but it's an inspiration for
mm, mm,
the way in which I wish to hope to, perform, step up to in these
sure.
stages of life that we all have to adapt to and transcend eventually. But
Mm,
it's a call. It's a call. It's a
sure.
call. You know.
Mm.
So, you know, yeah.
Well, speaking of the CSA and Franklin, yesterday we were visiting with some dear devotees, and a longtime devotee friend actually gave Nick, my intimate partner, an original knee of listening, with the yellow. And yes, I can see it there behind you. Mm, mm. Yes, there you go. And on the, yes, and in the very back of it, and what does CSA stand for, Ed?
Um, you're gonna tax my memory here. I'm not quite. Um, I'll think of it in a minute.
Okay, yeah. So in the front there also there's the logo. Speaking of Adida as the artist, yes, and his written word and his visual art. There is the logo, an incredible image of the whole process embodied in that image there, visually. And then that image is in written form in the words of his Leela in that knee of listening. And the ashram, the ashram on Melrose. And then look at the very back page where it says, if you want to contact Franklin. Yes. If you wish to communicate with Franklin, you are invited to write the ashram at 13 Melrose Avenue, Los Angeles, California, 93338 or 5?
90038.
Yes, beautiful. 90038 and number 13. So we were speaking about this and what you're pointing to. Just beautiful, beautiful. Yep.
So all these early pieces of history that are not
Yes.
put away somewhere.
Yes. So his Leela is the Leela is not just the written word that came about in terms of what was decided to be published as it was published at any time. As you indicated, the fullness of his written word is all of it, and even like how something began to be written and communicated and how it ended up in the form to be eventually put into a published book that is for the public to be relating to, which is an esoteric communication. And he had very specific reasons for why he chose to do it as he did at any given time. But the real process is the Leela of that manifestation. And this is what you're speaking about in terms of the archive that you have established as Beezone and what you have at your fingertips to make available for that precious gift.
Well, it may be interesting one time, because I do know the story from Panico and how Alan Watts and some of the early, how they got endorsements and things of that sort. And also from Wes Vaught, who worked at the CSA Press, has his story of personally telling me how he met Franklin and how Franklin worked with the people in I think it was Kentucky, or I'm not quite sure. A mid-South state. But I actually have all the correspondences that Franklin made with Fred and the other people who worked in the press. And it would be good. I mean, it's more than just an hour-long video or a conversation, but it would be good one time to pull most of this out and to have a lesson of how this actually was created. The first book of the Knee of Listening with the original documents, or copies of the original documents. It just would be for historical sense. And this is one of the reasons why I do the Beezone, because it's not just in my lifetime. This is for future lifetimes, because the material I have there is can't be found anywhere else. A lot of it anyway.
Yes. And so that immediately, ding, is this secured? Like, do you have copies of these in safes? Is it all being kept really safe? Because it is, they are treasures. They are treasures. And they are gifts that he actually gave. And I wanted to speak about these gifts that he gave to so many people. And that was not arbitrary, like in the very early days. And as time went on, he taught us both about liberality, expansiveness, openness, giving over, generosity, the giver. The constant sharing of the gift is the securing of the gift, is the magnification of the gift. But then he also taught the discrimination required in terms of securing it, so that it isn't in perpetuity, so it isn't violated, so that it's safe, and so that it's made right use of, that it's not revised or taken out of context. So there's that delicate balance of how, and I know you've worked a lot with this, as you were describing earlier, the continuing relationship that you've had over all the years with those that have graciously participated with you in handing things over, or you considering things with them, or sharing things with other people, or deciding what you could put on your site and what you couldn't and how you could. So that's been quite an ordeal for you.
Oh, believe me. Yeah, it's been a creative ordeal, and it's been a good, I like a mix. I like to be engaged with people. I don't want to just be in a bland kind of, we all agree to something. It just doesn't seem to fit my personality. So because I always know that I grow with mixing and rubbing and disagreeing and being creative, but I'm moving forward with what I do. And if I bump into somebody, I apologize. But if I'm, bumped into by somebody else, and I don't mind, asking them to step out of my way either, or what brings you into my lane here. And I like a mix, and this is where I think things grow, because if you don't, you're just in a kind of status quo kind of world, you got to have,
a group think tank. We don't want a group think tank that just has one narrative, and that's it. Yeah, that's dangerous.
that's a dead
Mhm.
place to be.
Yeah, and so to that point, I want to attest to, with gratitude, what you're describing about the integrity of how you function, because this has served me also. And we've rubbed wrong, right, good, sometimes agree, sometimes don't disagree, and the ability to stay in the room with that process, with the only thing that's the same is the heart impulse, and that yearning for the truth to be revealed. And I have often, over these last few years, and through the observation of how things have been unfolding, in relationship to the various services that people do in very different, the broad spectrum of the gathering of those who have responded to Adi Da, is that when there is an argument, it represents point of views. Adi Da's teaching is a resolution of that conflict, so that, and all inclusive, so that the place that we rest where there's no argument isn't because differing points of views are not acceptable to be able to voice or to investigate. It's that the radical understanding of the nature of the divine process in person as reality truth is being avoided. So the conflict becomes the focus rather than the singularity of the place within which we can continue that revelatory process and magnification of his person as the bright.
And also the item by which you're conflicting with gets purified and clarified.
Yes. Yes.
In that context, because that's
yes.
the samyama of the argument, if you will, not just his argument, but your argument.
Yes. Yes, precisely, because it isn't the argument. If you objectify it, then you're avoiding radical understanding. There is no separation in the patterning as it arises as constantly conflicting points of view. That is attention. Attention itself is constantly observing that dichotomy. So that which has no other, in which there can be no argument, it is irrefutable, most fundamentally irrefutable. That is the place in which where we combined in recognition response.
And liberating.
Yeah, liberated.
It frees you
freely.
It frees you to engage in the next level, if you will, of what it is that you're doing. This is assuming that you're in some kind of a creative process here. You're not just yelling from left field about the pitcher and you're in the game.
Yeah, so the love and the humor and the discrimination and the compassion, the willingness to embrace, and then also to be true and honest and transparent, all these qualities are exactly the demonstration of Adi Da's life, and everything that he related to or touched or participated in or created, through his written word, his verbal word, his interactions, his sacred domain, his intimate life, his art, all of these treasures that he describes as his agents, those siddhis are alive. What we're describing are actually siddhis inherent in bright, unqualified life of consciousness and its inherent radiance. And all of the perturbations of that manifest as you and I and room and space and air and wind and earth and water and all of it, all of the elements then are in harmony if that recognition is alive, and we can have the creative process that will have all of the qualities of a manifest dance, but it's in love.
It's always a creative process. And this is where people get stuck in understanding the process, because they somehow think there's somehow a purified revelation already established in its pure form, or this process of working with people and things and time limitations, the somehow, you know, you get dirt under your fingernails, it doesn't look good. But this is where the work is. The work is in the creative process. And we're only in, if you took his lifetime, which is a very short window in the eternal moment, well, so is yours, so is mine, so is this moment. It's just the beginning, but it's not fully established, although the revelation has been shown to whatever degree you can hear and see it
Yeah,
and bring it into your heart and life.
yeah.
So this is the samyama, the struggle. And so people don't want to either enter into it, or they set up in the judge's chambers and they make declarations and they make judgments, and the jury is over there saying they're guilty, innocent, and acquitted. Or so everybody's got a judging function in this kind of abstraction or moral high ground. They don't want to get into the mix where life really needs to be in the mix. And it is in
And
the
again, I
mix.
can just say pointing to the way that he lived and demonstrated that was constantly that breaking free, always standing free in the midst, is the midst, in the midst, as I am, always breaking free of that, the structuring, the attempt to define it, as a pattern.
And living in it, because this isn't an enlightened world. And so you have to live within the limits without going stark raving mad, or making something, some political or social or philosophical summation or idea that you've somehow understood the enclosure that you're in, or the times that you're in, and you get some conspiratorial matrix that you've devised in your own mind about the world. And it's really how people make up all these stories about the world, and they sit in judgment of other people in the world, and they're not engaged, and they don't understand how the real process takes what
Well,
it takes.
it is a I feel so grateful that my life that I have this opportunity to be able to invest myself in this process. And when I say this process or the process, I'm talking about life, all of it, not a program. And that was never what it was like around Beloved either. He was always breaking free of the program that was being superimposed on him. So that was the gift, is that the free investigation, fully committed to the allowing the revelation and then participating in that based on radical self-understanding in the nature of the activity that creates this, where you can't even see anything for real through this as the body man. You can't even see anything for real, and as he indicated, and as you're indicating, seeing all of the humanness of his interactions through over all the years, is that he, as he indicated, particularly at the moment of the divine self-emergence event, he actually accomplished the embodiment of conscious being itself in the physical form, non-differently, so that he could communicate to us as us even more clearly than we could or were capable of. And why? That was because no recoil. The I am of being itself, fully embodied down to the toes. And he doesn't mean that confined to a physical form. It's the recognition of the form as it is, gross, subtle, and causal, beyond the separate self sense, and above and beyond the Atmanadi Shakti Yoga, that is all inclusive of every aspect of life as it is lived in bright recognition. Literally, that was his perpetual demonstration. And speaking of his teaching, when you describe all the subtleties and the nuances that you were speaking about earlier, and just the incredibly rich story and leela and details that can be told in the archives, and how this has to be available for people who are serious to study all of this, he wanted that too. And at the end of his life, he said, you are hardly making any of this available, to everyone. And he kept trying to recapitulate it and put it into another form with an attempt to speak to beginners who were not actually taking responsibility for the ability to even begin the way for real. So, that Leela needs to be taken into account in terms of the actual investigation of his word and his Leela, because at the end of his life, he said, what I am saying now is absolutely no different than what I said the day that I opened the Melrose Ashram and began to speak. So there was a full demonstration of his early life. There was the demonstration of his life as the teaching, the revelation years, the indifference, the outshining, and all of what he described as the 7th stage demonstration. And yet what he was saying the whole while is, I am no different than I have always been.
Mm-hmm. And you're not, and you better get up to the stuff here.
Yeah. So again, it's so with your out of the blue, here you are, and you've offered this gift and this service to humanity. This gift that your service is this for the divine process for all, because with Beezone, you not only, as you described, yes, the impulse was originally associated a lot with what came into your sphere of the beauty of all this richness of his word and such, but then you also, in your website, there's all the traditions that are being brought in too. There's your